Min-woo stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching Seoul's skyline blur through unshed tears. His empire, built over 15 years of relentless work, had crumbled in 72 hours. The cyber attack had been surgical, devastating, every account frozen, every asset seized by phantom transactions that left no trace. The police spoke of sophistication beyond anything they'd encountered. His board had already moved to remove him. The newspapers called it the biggest corporate hack in Korean history. He'd lost everything: the company, the reputation, the future he'd sacrificed his youth to build. His phone buzzed with messages from lawyers, creditors, former friends distancing themselves. The penthouse would be gone by month's end. Min-woo pressed his forehead against the cold glass, exhaustion washing over him. He hadn't slept in days. The code auditors found nothing. The security team found nothing. It was as if a ghost had reached into his life and destroyed it with invisible hands. Below, the city continued its relentless rhythm, indifferent to his catastrophe. He thought about his late father, who'd built the company's foundation, about promises made at a funeral 10 years ago. All gone now. A soft knock interrupted his spiral. He ignored it. The cleaning staff had been told to leave him alone, but the knock came again, gentle but persistent. "Mr. Kang?" A woman's voice, hesitant. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I think I found something." Min-woo turned slowly. The night-cleaning woman stood in the doorway, clutching her cart with one hand, a crumpled piece of paper in the other. Her uniform was too large, her face partially hidden behind thick-framed glasses. He didn't even know her name. Her name was Ji-eun, and she'd been cleaning Min-woo's office building for 3 years. She moved through the gleaming corridors like a shadow, arriving after everyone left, gone before anyone arrived. The corporate workers never saw her, never wondered who emptied their trash or made their world spotless. She preferred it that way. Invisibility was safety. Ji-eun had learned to be invisible long ago, in the orphanage where she'd grown up, then in the string of temporary jobs that followed. No family, no connections, no security beyond what she could earn with her own hands. She'd taught herself to read English from discarded magazines, learned basic coding from library computers during her lunch breaks, educated herself in the margins of other people's lives. The corporate executives left everything lying around: confidential documents, passwords on sticky notes, open laptops. They never imagined the cleaning woman could read their screens, understand their careless conversations. Ji-eun had watched Min-woo for 3 years. Watched him work until midnight, sleep on his office couch, sacrifice everything for the company his father had started. She'd seen his kindness too, the way he never spoke down to service staff, how he'd once helped her when she dropped a tray of coffee cups, telling her it was okay, accidents happen. He'd looked at her then, really looked, one of the few who ever did. Now she stood before him, heart hammering, knowing she was breaking the cardinal rule of invisibility. But she couldn't watch him destroyed by something she might be able to fix. "What is it?" His voice was hollow, defeated. Ji-eun stepped forward, unfolding the paper covered in her careful handwriting. Ji-eun's hands trembled as she spread the paper on Min-woo's desk. She'd written down strings of code she'd glimpsed on a discarded printout 3 nights ago in the trash bin of the IT department. At the time, she hadn't understood why something about those lines made her pause, made her smooth out the crumpled page and study it under the fluorescent lights of the supply closet. "I don't understand," Min-woo said, staring at her handwriting. The exhaustion in his eyes made him look older than his 38 years. "You're a cleaner. How do you—" "I taught myself," Ji-eun interrupted quietly. "Programming. At libraries. I've been watching your company's systems for a while. Not spying," she added quickly, seeing his expression change. "Just learning And 3 days ago I found this in the trash. It looked wrong. Min-woo picked up the paper, his business mind slowly engaging despite his fatigue. The code was complex, buried deep in what appeared to be a routine system update. "This is from our last security patch," he murmured. "The one installed a week before the attack." Ji-eun nodded. "I think someone hid something in it. A backdoor. I'm not skilled enough to be certain, but these lines here," she pointed with a hesitant finger, "they don't match the patterns of the rest. They're accessing admin privileges through a secondary pathway." Min-woo's hands stopped shaking. For the first time in 72 hours, something sparked behind his eyes. Hope, perhaps, or simply the relief of a man drowning who'd just spotted distant shore. "If you're right," he breathed. "If this is the entry point." "Your forensic team might have missed it," Ji-eun continued, her voice gaining confidence, "because it's not in the financial systems. It's in the building security interface. Nobody would think to look there." Min-woo stared at Ji-eun as if seeing her for the first time. She stood in the shadows of his office, this woman who cleaned his floors and apparently understood code better than his security team. Her uniform hung loose on her small frame, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face bare of makeup. She looked young, perhaps late 20s, with eyes that held more intelligence than her station suggested. "What's your name?" he asked, though it felt absurd that he didn't already know. "Kim Ji-eun." She bowed slightly, an ingrained habit. "I've worked here for 3 years, sir." 3 years. He'd passed her countless times, never truly seeing her. The realization brought a flush of shame. "Ji-eun," he repeated. "Can you help me verify this? My team is gone. The building's being seized next week. I have no resources, no access, nothing but a laptop and whatever time we have before they cut the power." She hesitated, and he saw fear flicker across her features. Helping him meant exposure, meant stepping out of whatever safe shadows she'd built around herself. He had nothing to offer her in return, except risk. "I can try," she finally said. "But I'll need access to the main server room, and I'll need you to trust me, even though I'm just—" "Don't," Min-woo interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't diminish yourself. Right now, you're the only person who's given me any hope." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the careful mask she wore. For just a moment, he glimpsed vulnerability beneath, loneliness perhaps, or the exhaustion of always being overlooked. Then she straightened, that invisible armor settling back into place. "The night security guard leaves his post at midnight," she said. "We have a 30-minute window before he returns. That's when I usually clean the server room." The server room hummed with contained power, rows of machines blinking in the darkness. Min-woo had never spent much time here, trusting his IT department to manage the infrastructure. Now he watched Ji-eun move between the racks with unexpected confidence, her fingers flying across a keyboard she'd connected to the main terminal. She'd removed her thick glasses, revealing sharper, more defined features. Without them, she looked different, more focused, less invisible. "Here," she whispered, though they were alone. "This is the security interface. It monitors building access, camera feeds, employee badges. It's supposed to be isolated from financial systems, which is why your forensic team wouldn't have checked it thoroughly." Min-woo leaned over her shoulder, close enough to catch the faint scent of generic soap and something else, maybe jasmine. The screen filled with cascading lines of code. "There," Ji-eun pointed. "This subroutine. It was added during the patch installation, but it's not in the official update documentation. It creates a tunnel between the security system and your financial network. Someone used building access codes to authenticate transactions, making them look legitimate. Min-woo's breath caught. The hack came from inside the building. Yes, someone with physical access planted this code, then used it remotely to initiate the transfers. The attack looked external because they routed it through multiple proxies, but the authorization came from here. She pulled up access logs, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. 3 months ago, someone accessed this terminal at 3 a.m. The badge ID belongs to a contractor from the security upgrade project. Min-woo grabbed his phone, photographing the screen. Evidence. Finally, tangible evidence. "You found it," he said, voice rough with emotion. "You actually found it." Ji-eun's cheeks colored slightly. "We still need to trace where the money went." They worked through the night, Ji-eun's fingers dancing across keyboards while Min-woo made notes, his business acumen complementing her technical knowledge. She showed him how the hacker had layered the theft, small transactions bleeding his accounts over weeks before the final devastating strike. "It's elegant," Ji-eun murmured, almost admiringly. Whoever did this understood not just code, but corporate psychology. They knew where to hide, how long to wait, exactly when to strike for maximum damage. Min-woo studied her profile in the monitor's glow. "You understand it too." "How?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling on the keyboard. When she spoke, her voice carried old pain. "I grew up with nothing. At the orphanage, I learned that knowledge was the only thing nobody could take away. I studied everything I could, math, English, computers. I thought if I was smart enough, skilled enough, someone would notice. Someone would give me a chance." Her laugh was bitter. "But intelligence doesn't matter when you have no credentials, no connections. The best job I could get was cleaning, so I kept learning anyway, in secret, because what else was there?" Min-woo felt something crack in his chest. He'd been born to privilege, his education guaranteed, his path smoothed by family name and wealth. He'd never considered what brilliance might be scrubbing toilets because the world refused to look. "After this is over," he said carefully, "if we can prove what happened, if I can rebuild, I want you on my security team, properly, with credentials, training, whatever you need." Ji-eun's eyes widened, then filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I always keep my promises." He meant it. The server room lights flickered, a warning. They had minutes before the security guard returned. Ji-eun's investigation led them to a name, Park Sung-min, a contractor who'd worked on the building's security upgrade. His company had dissolved 2 months ago, right after the installation was complete. Min-woo recognized the pattern. Shell companies, careful timing, professional execution. "He's not working alone," Min-woo said, pulling up corporate records on his laptop. They'd relocated to an all-night cafe, blending into the crowd of students and insomniacs. Ji-eun sat across from him, a cheap coffee cooling in her hands. This level of sophistication requires backing, money, planning, inside information. "Someone who knew your company intimately," Ji-eun agreed. "Someone who understood your security protocols well enough to know exactly where to plant the back door." Min-woo's stomach turned. Someone inside. They compiled a list. Executives, department heads, anyone with sufficient access and knowledge. Min-woo found himself studying faces of people he'd trusted, wondering which smile had hidden betrayal. Ji-eun worked methodically, cross-referencing financial records she accessed through methods Min-woo suspected weren't entirely legal. He should have stopped her. Instead, he watched her work with growing respect. "Here," she said suddenly, "CFO Lee Jae-sung. He had meetings with Park Sung-min's company before the contract was awarded. And look, he sold his stock options 2 weeks before the attack, all of them." The evidence crystallized. Lee Jae-sung, his chief financial officer for 8 years, a man Min-woo had considered a friend, who'd stood beside him at his father's funeral, who'd shared countless late-night strategy sessions. The betrayal burned worse than the financial loss. "Why?" Min-woo's voice cracked. Ji-eun reached across the table, her small hand covering his. The gesture was brief, almost unconscious, but it steadied him. "Greed," she said simply. "It's always greed or fear. Sometimes both." Min-woo arranged a meeting with Lee Jae-sung at a hotel restaurant, neutral territory. He brought Ji-eun, introducing her vaguely as a consultant. Lee's eyes barely registered her presence before dismissing her, another invisible woman. That would be his mistake. "Min-woo," Lee smiled, expansive and false. "I'm glad you called. I wanted to discuss the transition, make sure you land on your feet after this tragedy." "Tragedy," Min-woo repeated coldly. Interesting word choice. He slid a folder across the table. "Recognize this code?" Lee's smile faltered as he opened the folder. Ji-eun had compiled everything. The backdoor code, the access logs, Lee's financial transactions, his connection to Park Sung-min. The evidence was circumstantial but damning, enough to raise serious questions. "I don't know what you think you found," Lee started. "We found your betrayal," Min-woo interrupted. "Every piece of it. The contractor you hired, the backdoor you helped install, the timing of your stock sales. You destroyed everything my father built, everything I worked for, so you could cash out." Lee's expression hardened, the mask dropping. "Your father was a fool and so are you. Do you know how many years I watched you play generous CEO while I did the real work? How many times I saved your company while you got the credit? So you decided to destroy it instead. I decided to take what I deserved. And you can't prove anything." Lee stood confident. "That code could have been planted by anyone. My stock sale was coincidental. You have theories, nothing more." "Maybe," Ji-eun spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. "But we also have Park Sung-min." Lee froze. "He's dead. Car accident 3 weeks ago." "His laptop wasn't in the car," Ji-eun continued. "I wonder what the police would find if they knew where to look." Lee Jae-sung's confidence cracked like ice under weight. He stared at Ji-eun, really seeing her now, recalculating. "You're bluffing," he said, but uncertainty edged his voice. "The police closed that investigation." Min-woo leaned forward. "Here's what happens next. You have 48 hours to return every one you stole. Transfer it back through whatever channels you used. I don't care about the logistics." "And if I refuse?" "Then we take this evidence to the prosecutor's office. Maybe it's circumstantial, maybe not. But it'll be enough to freeze your assets during the investigation, enough to destroy your reputation, enough to ensure you spend the next decade in legal battles, even if you eventually win." Lee's jaw clenched. "You can't rebuild, even if you get the money back. The company's gone." "That's my problem, not yours. You have 48 hours. Lee stood abruptly, his chair scraping harsh against marble floors. Other diners glanced over, then away. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Actually," Ji-eun said, still seated, still calm, "it is, because we're recording this conversation, and you just admitted knowledge of the contractor and the timeline. Thank you for that." Lee's face drained of color. He looked between them, trapped, then stalked away without another word. When he was gone, Min-woo exhaled shakily. "We weren't really recording, were we?" "Of course we were." Ji-eun pulled a small device from her purse, smiling slightly. "I borrowed it from the security office. I'll return it tonight." Min-woo laughed, the sound surprising him. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. "You're terrifying," he said. "You're welcome," she replied. The next 48 hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Min-woo barely slept, jumping at every notification. Ji-eun stayed close, monitoring the accounts, watching for any sign of movement. At 11:47 p.m. on the second night, Ji-eun's laptop chimed. She and Min-woo were in his nearly empty apartment, surrounded by packed boxes and the debris of his former life. They'd spent the evening talking, sharing stories, her childhood in the orphanage, his isolation despite privilege, the ways they'd both learned to survive in different worlds. "It's happening," Ji-eun breathed, watching the screen. "He's transferring it back." Numbers cascaded across the monitor, millions returning from offshore accounts through the same complex pathways they'd been stolen through. Lee was covering his tracks, making it look legitimate, but the money was coming home. Min-woo stood behind her, afraid to hope. All of it? 93% so far. He's keeping some for himself, probably thinks you won't notice. Should I? Let him keep it, Min-woo decided. I just want enough to restart. The transfers took 3 hours. When the last one completed, Ji-eun closed her laptop and turned to him. In the dim apartment light, exhaustion and relief mingled on both their faces. "You did it," Min-woo said softly. "You saved everything." "We did it," Ji-eun corrected. "You had the courage to fight back." They stood close in the semi-darkness, and Min-woo realized how beautiful she was, not in the polished way of the executives and socialites he usually encountered, but in something deeper. Resilience, perhaps. Intelligence. Quiet strength. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about the job, about everything. When I rebuild, I want you beside me. Not as an employee, as a partner. Min-woo, you don't have to answer now, just don't disappear. Don't go back to being invisible." Ji-eun's eyes shimmered. "I don't know how to be anything else." Min-woo presented the recovered funds to his board within a week. The evidence against Lee Jae-sung was enough to force his resignation, though never enough to prosecute. He'd been too careful. But the board reinstated Min-woo as CEO, and he used his restored position to make changes. Ji-eun resigned from the cleaning company. Min-woo enrolled her in corporate cybersecurity courses, hired tutors, gave her access to resources she'd never dreamed of. She learned voraciously, proving what he'd already known. Her mind was brilliant, her instincts sharp. She just needed opportunity. The company recovered slowly. Min-woo rebuilt more carefully this time, with better security and less trust in appearances. He promoted from within, sought talent in unexpected places, remembered that the most valuable people were often the most overlooked. Ji-eun became his chief security officer within 2 years. She transformed the company's defenses, trained teams, spoke at conferences. The media loved the story. Cleaning woman turned executive, though Ji-eun hated the attention. She preferred working behind the scenes, still uncomfortable in the spotlight, but she never tried to be invisible again. Min-woo watched her bloom with quiet pride. She cut her hair shorter, styled it professionally, started wearing contacts instead of those thick glasses, dressed in tailored suits that finally fit. But the changes went deeper than appearance. She smiled more, laughed occasionally. Let herself take up space. They worked closely, their partnership seamless. Min-woo came to rely on her insights, her different perspective, her way of seeing patterns others missed. Colleagues assumed they were romantically involved, and Min-woo never corrected them. The truth was more complicated. He cared for her deeply, loved her probably, but he'd given her opportunity and position, and he wouldn't use that power to pressure her. So he waited, patient, hoping she might someday see him as something other than the man who'd changed her life. The company anniversary gala was held on the building's rooftop, Seoul glittering below like scattered stars. Min-woo stood at the edge of the celebration, watching Ji-eun network with board members. She'd grown so confident, so assured. Yet sometimes he still glimpsed the girl who'd knocked on his office door 3 years ago, clutching crumpled paper and hope. "You're staring again," his assistant commented, passing with champagne flutes. Min-woo didn't deny it. "I'm proud of her." "You're in love with her," the assistant corrected. Everyone knows except possibly Ji-eun herself. Why don't you tell her? Because I don't want her to feel obligated. You're an idiot, the assistant said fondly. Respectfully, sir. Min-woo smiled, but the words stung because they were true. He'd spent 3 years building walls around his feelings, maintaining professional distance, never crossing lines. But those walls felt increasingly pointless. Life was too short for such careful cowardice. Ji-eun approached, 2 champagne glasses in hand. She'd worn a midnight blue dress tonight, simple but elegant, her hair swept up to expose her neck. You look miserable for someone whose company just posted record profits, she observed, handing him a glass. Just thinking. About? About how 3 years ago I thought I'd lost everything, how I was ready to give up. You wouldn't have, Ji-eun said with certainty. You're too stubborn. Maybe, but I would have lost myself. You saved more than my company, Ji-eun. You saved me. She met his eyes, something shifting in her expression. Min-woo. I know I shouldn't say this, he continued, the champagne or the moonlight or simple exhaustion loosening his tongue. I know our professional relationship makes it complicated, but I need you to know, you're not just my colleague, you're not just my friend. Ji-eun's breath caught, her champagne glass trembling slightly. Around them, the party continued, oblivious to this small moment that felt world-changing. You don't have to respond, Min-woo said quickly. I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide, your position here is secure. Your career, your future. None of that depends on your answer. Stop, Ji-eun interrupted. Stop assuming I'm some fragile thing that needs protection from your feelings. She set down her glass, turning to face him fully. Do you know why I knocked on your office door that night? It wasn't just because I found the code. It was because for 3 years I'd watched you, and you were the only person who ever saw me, really saw me. When I dropped those coffee cups, you didn't ignore me or yell. You helped. You looked at me like I was a person. You are a person, Min-woo said, confused. To you, maybe. But I've spent my entire life being invisible, being overlooked, being the help. And then you gave me opportunity, gave me a chance to become someone. How could I not fall in love with you? Min-woo's heart stopped. I'm terrified, Ji-eun admitted. You're CEO of a major corporation. I'm still the girl from the orphanage who cleaned your floors. People already whisper that I slept my way into this position. If this becomes real, let them whisper, Min-woo said, stepping closer. I don't care what they think. I care. I worked too hard to be dismissed as someone's mistress. Then we'll prove them wrong. Together. Ji-eun, you're the smartest person I know. You rebuilt this company's security from nothing. You earned every success. With your help. And I earned mine with yours. We're partners. We've always been partners. Why not make it official? Ji-eun laughed, tearful. That's possibly the worst proposal I've ever heard. Min-woo grinned, pulling a small box from his pocket. Ji-eun's eyes widened. You're not serious. I've been carrying this for 6 months, he admitted, waiting for courage or the right moment or some sign from the universe. But tonight feels right. So Kim Ji-eun, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything, not just business? Ji-eun stared at the ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the city lights. This is insane, she whispered. Probably. But I spent 3 years being careful and professional and respecting boundaries. And I'm done. I love you. I've loved you since you walked into my office with crumpled paper and courage I didn't have. Marry me. Yes, Ji-eun said, laughing through tears. Yes, you impossible man. Min-woo slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her close, kissing her like he'd wanted to for 3 years. Around them, the party erupted in applause. Apparently they'd had an audience. Ji-eun hid her face in his shoulder, embarrassed, but she was smiling. The next morning, the engagement announcement hit the news. As predicted, some outlets focused on the Cinderella story, the cleaning woman marrying the CEO, but others highlighted Ji-eun's accomplishments, her transformation of the company's security, her rise through genuine merit. Min-woo framed one particular headline: "Former cleaner, now one of Seoul's top cybersecurity experts, shows talent has no background." They married 6 months later, a small ceremony with people who actually mattered. Ji-eun wore a simple white dress and smiled more than Min-woo had ever seen. He looked at her during their vows and saw not the invisible woman or the brilliant executive, but simply Ji-eun, complicated, fierce, kind, his. Their story wasn't about rescue or salvation. It was about two people who'd saved each other, who'd found partnership in the wreckage of betrayal, who'd chosen to be visible together. As they left the ceremony, Ji-eun squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me." "Thank you," Min-woo replied, "for refusing to stay invisible."